Hello, it's Angela with the Mount Airy Public Library. We're out here in the garden today, and we have a new story from storyteller Brack Llewellyn, and our story today is The Frog Prince. And we thought to hear by the frog pond, the lily pond, would be the best place to do it. So you enjoy the story, and I will talk to you later.
All right, everyone, gather round, gather round. Bring the adults in. They need to hear these stories as well. Now remember, you have to listen with both ears and watch with your eyes. Pay close attention. Most importantly, turn on the old imagination so the words that I'm sending out to you can form pictures in those wonderful minds of yours. Now this is a very old story. This, in fact, was one of the Brothers Grimm's favorite stories that they created. Whenever they put out a book of their stories, this one was always at the front of the book so people would read it first. And it's actually a pretty simple story. And in learning this story, I learned something too, and we'll share that toward the end. Now, once there was a beautiful princess in a kingdom, and she was a little bit vain, a little bit struck on herself. She thought she was pretty, she thought she was graceful, and she was, but sometimes she thought she was a little too pretty and a little too graceful. But she was the princess, so what she said was what had to happen. Now this princess had, among her many jewels, a beautiful necklace that she wore. And she was so proud of this necklace. It had a beautiful stone. It was quite valuable. And she wore it almost every day. It was her favorite piece of jewelry. One day, the princess was out for a walk in the forest. She came upon a small pond, not unlike this one behind me, maybe a little larger than this. And there were lily pads in it, as you see, and all sorts of beautiful flowers around it. And she sat down at the edge of this pond and leaned over to see her reflection in the water. When she did, her necklace came off. The chain snapped, and it dropped right into the pool and sank all the way to the bottom. Well, the princess was terrified. Her favorite piece of jewelry had fallen in the water, and the water didn't look very clean, and she didn't want to get in the water, and she couldn't swim anyway, and she didn't know what she was going to do. But she wasn't the only one who saw this necklace fall into the water. Across the pond there was a frog, just your common frog, sitting on a lily pad getting some sun. And he had seen the necklace fall into the water, and he saw how upset the princess was. So he promptly hopped off the lily pad into the water, and being a frog, swam to the bottom, found the necklace, grabbed up the chain in his mouth, and swam back to the surface and handed it to the princess. He had rescued her necklace. Well, she was extremely surprised and grateful, and she said, "Oh, frog, if you could speak, I would thank you." And the frog said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I can speak. I've just never had anyone to talk to until now." Well, the princess was amazed. Here was a talking frog. And she said, "Well, what can I do for you? How can I reward you for saving my necklace?" He said, "More than anything, I'd like to have a friend. I have frog friends, but I have no people friends. And I think it would be wonderful to have a people friend, especially a beautiful princess like yourself." Well, she was flattered by the frog, but at the same time, he was a frog. How could she be friends with a frog? But at the same time, she owed this frog a courtesy. So she said, "All right, I will try to be your friend. I will come here every day and we'll talk, and we'll see if we can be good friends." And the frog thought that was wonderful. So the next day the princess came back to the little pond, and the frog was there waiting for her. And he swam through the water and hopped up onto the bank next to her, and they talked. And it turned out that the frog was wonderful company. The princess really began to like him. He knew a lot of funny stories. He knew the history of the forest. He'd tell her all the frog gossip going on in the pond. He was a wonderful conversationalist, and they struck it off beautifully. The princess would come to the pond every day that she could to visit with her friend the frog. And the longer they got to know each other, the better friends they became, just like as you do with other friends. Time went on. And one day, in a silence in their conversation, the princess said, "You know, Mr. Frog, if I could marry you, I would. But good heavens, a princess marrying a frog, how could that ever be?" Well, the frog blushed. Yes, frogs can blush. And he was very flattered by what she'd said. And he told her, "I do have a secret that I haven't told you so far. You see, I am a frog only by chance. Years ago, I was a young man, and a spell was cast upon me to turn me into a frog, and I've been living in this pond ever since. That's how I know all these things, and why I crave a person as a friend, and how I can speak. And the princess said, really? So you were once a person like me? Oh, yes, he said. Oh, yes, very much so. Well, she said, how would we break this spell? The frog turned his eyes toward the water, and he said, there's really only one way to break this spell. You have to give me a kiss. Well, the princess couldn't speak for a moment. She enjoyed having the frog as a friend and someone to talk with, and she certainly owed him that courtesy because he had saved her favorite necklace. But to kiss a frog? Oh, she didn't know if she could do that or not. And the frog said, if you will give me a kiss, I will transform back into a man, and then perhaps we can talk about being married. The princess said, give me a little time to think about this. So she went home, and she thought about it all day. She thought about it all night. She couldn't sleep. She really liked the frog, and if there was a chance that he really was a handsome young man, oh, what a wonderful companion in life he would be. So the next day, the princess got up, got dressed, and made her way down to the pond, and the frog was there waiting for her answer. She looked at him. She said, I've given this a lot of thought, and I think I'm going to try. I don't know if I can, but I think I'm going to try to give you a kiss. The frog was delighted. She reached down and picked him up in her hands and held him up in front of her, as you would any frog. Then she closed her eyes first, and she puckered up her lips, and she leaned in and gave him a kiss. It wasn't much of a kiss, but it was a kiss nonetheless. And you know what? It worked. The frog began to shake, and he began to laugh, and he said, put me down on the ground. And as soon as she did, the wind picked up, the leaves rustled, and she watched as this frog transformed magically into this handsome young man who could have been a prince himself. It was the most marvelous thing this princess had ever seen in her life. The kiss had worked. And so they talked again, this time person to person. The spell was broken, and they soon fell very much in love, and they did marry. And they lived happily for many, many years together after that. Now, what did I learn from learning this story to tell you? Well, never judge a person or anyone else by the way they look. Someone who might be a toad or a frog is still a handsome prince, maybe in disguise. And don't assume all your friends have to be the same kind of people. You can have friends of all different kinds of people because they know funny stories, and they know the history of their forest. They know all the frog gossip, maybe. And that's what I learned from this story. Maybe that's a lesson for all of us to learn. We hope you'll continue to watch our fairy tales and share them with your friends, and we'll see you again soon. As always, you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you.